The crystalline spires of New Geneva's diplomatic quarter caught the morning light, casting prismatic reflections across the briefing room where Ethan Kovac stood at parade rest. 15 years in interstellar security forces had taught him patience, but diplomatic babysitting still ranked low on his preferred assignments list. Commander Kovac, Admiral Devereaux's holographic projection flickered slightly. This isn't standard protection detail. Ambassador Vix represents the Araxian Collective's highest authority. With respect, Admiral, I've guarded heads of state before, Ethan replied, running a hand through his close-cropped dark hair. The scar that bisected his left eyebrow tightened with his frown. Not like this one. Araxians don't just have different customs, they have different biology, different thought processes. Ambassador Vix has never requested human security before. Ethan raised an eyebrow. Then why start now? The Nexus 7 negotiations are too important to risk. There have been 3 assassination attempts on diplomatic envoys in that sector in the past month. The Admiral's expression hardened. The ambassador specifically requested someone with your unique qualifications. My combat record, you mean? That and your experience with non-human psychology. The Admiral's hologram glanced down at a data pad. Just remember, Araxians value protocol above all else. One cultural misstep could unravel years of diplomatic work. 2 hours later, Ethan stood in the cavernous atrium of the Araxian embassy, watching as Ambassador Selene Vix descended the gravity-defying spiral staircase. Unlike the holographic briefings he'd studied, nothing had prepared him for her actual presence. She moved with liquid grace, her tall, willowy form draped in layers of iridescent diplomatic robes that shifted color with her movements. Her skin was the pale blue of distant stars, marked with luminescent patterns that seemed to pulse with her heartbeat. Most striking were her eyes, entirely silver, with no visible pupils, yet somehow conveying a penetrating intelligence that made Ethan feel uncomfortably exposed. Commander Kovac, her voice had an almost musical quality, each word precisely modulated. Your service record is impressive. Thank you, Ambassador, Ethan responded with a formal bow, exactly 15 degrees as the briefing had specified. Her head tilted slightly, the light catching on the delicate architectural patterns embedded in her scalp where humans would have hair. You have studied our customs. Good, though your pronunciation of our traditional greeting needs considerable work. I wasn't aware I'd attempted a greeting in your language, Ambassador. The corners of her mouth moved almost imperceptibly. Your body spoke it. The bow, the posture, the regulated breathing, all part of the Araxian formal introduction. Most humans don't realize our communication is only 30% verbal. She circled him slowly, her robes whispering against the polished floor. The mission to Nexus 7 carries significant risk, Commander. The insurgent faction there believes alliance with humanity weakens the purity of older species like mine. I'm familiar with their manifestos, Ethan replied. I've dealt with similar ideologies on 3 worlds. Ambassador Vix stopped directly before him, close enough that he could see the subtle shifts in her luminescent markings. And you were injured on each occasion. Getting injured is sometimes part of keeping others safe. Something flickered across her silver eyes, concern perhaps, though he couldn't be certain. On Araxis, such sacrifice is considered inefficient. We value strategic withdrawal over heroic last stands. With respect, Ambassador, sometimes there's no time to withdraw. Her head tilted again, studying him with unnerving intensity. A difference in philosophy we may yet debate, Commander. She extended a 6-fingered hand, the traditional Araxian gesture of professional acceptance. Our transport departs at dawn. I advise you to study the security protocols I've prepared. As their hands met, an unexpected jolt of warmth passed between them. Selene's markings pulsed briefly with a bright pattern he hadn't seen in any of the briefing materials. She withdrew her hand quickly, her perfect composure momentarily disrupted. An atmospheric discharge, she explained, though something in her tone suggested otherwise. Prepare thoroughly, Commander Kovac. On Nexus 7, protocol isn't merely formality, it's survival. The diplomatic hall on Nexus 7 gleamed with an unnatural perfection that put Ethan on edge. 3 days of tense negotiations had yielded minimal progress, but at least there had been no security incidents. Until now. Ethan's combat implant buzzed a silent warning as he scanned the assembled dignitaries. Something was wrong. The Centaurian delegate was speaking too rapidly, and the Terran ambassador kept touching his collar. "Ambassador," Ethan whispered, stepping closer to Selene, "we need to leave, now." Selene's silver eyes flashed with annoyance. "Commander, I am in the middle of—" The explosion ripped through the eastern wall, sending crystalline shards flying across the chamber. Ethan's training took over as he threw himself at Selene, shielding her body with his own as they hit the floor. "Stay down," he shouted over the sudden chaos of screams and weapons fire. Through the smoke, masked figures poured into the room, firing indiscriminately. Ethan recognized the distinctive red energy signatures of Varick disruptors, military-grade weapons designed to break down organic matter at the cellular level. "We need to reach the extraction point," he said, drawing his sidearm. "Stay behind me." As they crawled toward a service corridor, Ethan spotted a rebel taking aim directly at Selene's back. Without hesitation, he lunged into the line of fire. The first blast caught him in the shoulder, spinning him halfway around. The second and third tore through his abdomen and chest. Strangely, he felt no pain at first, just a sudden wetness and the metallic taste of blood in his mouth. He was still standing, somehow, his body operating on combat stimulants and sheer determination. "Ethan," Selene's voice cut through the haze, his first name on her lips sounding foreign and intimate. He fired back, dropping the attacker, then stumbled as his legs began to fail. Selene caught him, surprisingly strong as she dragged him into the service corridor and sealed the emergency barrier behind them. "Foolish human," she hissed, but her voice trembled. "Why did you not move aside?" Ethan tried to smile through the blood bubbling at his lips. "That's not how this works." She lowered him to the floor of the abandoned maintenance room, her robes spreading around them like spilled ink. Her normally perfect composure was shattered, her luminescent markings pulsing rapidly with patterns he now recognized as extreme distress. "Help is coming," she said, pressing her hands to his wounds. "You must maintain consciousness." The pain arrived then, white-hot and all-consuming. Ethan knew the feeling of fatal wounds, had cheated death twice before, but this was different. The Varick disruptors had done too much damage. "Ambassador," he coughed, "you need to find security forces. Don't stay here for me." "Silence," she commanded, but the authority in her voice was undermined by the tremor in her hands. "I will not leave you." Ethan watched with fading consciousness as Selene's diplomatic mask crumbled completely. Her silver eyes began to glisten with something he'd never seen in an Araxian, tears, collecting at the corners before trailing luminescent tracks down her blue cheeks. "You cannot die," she whispered, her musical voice breaking. "Not for me, not like this." Through the darkness encroaching on his vision, Ethan saw something change in her expression, resolve hardening through the grief. "Forgive me," she whispered, reaching into a hidden pocket of her robes. "What I am about to do violates every law of my people." As consciousness slipped away, Ethan felt her cool fingers on his face, unexpectedly tender. Her silver eyes were the last thing he saw, filled with an emotion no diplomatic briefing had ever mentioned Araxians could feel. Selene's hands trembled as she withdrew the small crystalline vial from her ceremonial robes. The Nexus bond symbiote pulsed inside with gentle blue light, a forbidden technology her people had banned centuries ago after nearly destroying themselves with its power. Every Araxian diplomat carried one, ironically, as a reminder of what boundaries should never be crossed. Using it meant exile, disgrace, the loss of everything she had worked for. Ethan's breathing had grown shallow, his usually vibrant eyes dulling as he struggled to remain conscious. "This will create a connection between us," Selene explained, her voice catching. "A symbiotic bond that will allow my life force to sustain yours until we can get proper medical attention." "Don't," Ethan managed, blood staining his lips. "Your career, your people, are not worth your life," she finished firmly, surprising herself with the truth of it. When had this human become more than a diplomatic responsibility? She broke the seal on the vial. The symbiote emerged, a luminescent strand of living energy that coiled around her 6 fingers. Ancient Araxian words fell from her lips, not from diplomatic training but from deeper racial memory. "This will be intimate," she warned, her markings flushing with embarrassment. "Our minds, our sensations, they will intertwine." Ethan's eyes widened slightly in understanding, but he gave a small nod. Selene placed one hand over his heart and the other on his forehead. The symbiote flowed from her fingers, sinking beneath his skin with a soft blue glow that traced his veins. The connection hit her like a supernova. Suddenly, she felt the searing pain of his wounds as if they were her own. His memories cascaded through her consciousness: childhood on a distant Earth colony, the loss of his parents to interstellar conflict, years of combat and loneliness. Deeper still, she felt his hidden admiration for her, his protective instinct that went beyond professional duty. In turn, she knew he was experiencing her memories: the rigid training of an Araxian diplomat, the isolation of being perpetually separated from genuine connection, and her growing fascination with him that she had denied even to herself. "Selene," he gasped, using her personal name for the first time. His hand reached up, touching the luminescent markings on her cheek with wonder. The symbiote pulsed between them, drawing them physically closer. She cradled him against her, their heartbeats synchronizing as the forbidden technology rewrote biological systems, channeling her regenerative abilities into his broken body. "I feel you," he whispered, his eyes now glowing faintly with the same light that ran through her markings. "All of you." The wounds began to close, the cellular destruction revering as the symbiote built new pathways between them. Selene felt a sensation she had never allowed herself before, a deep, consuming intimacy that transcended physical boundaries. Their foreheads touched, an action that on her world would signify the deepest possible trust. Through the bond, she felt his surprise at the significance of the gesture, followed by a wave of emotion that matched her own unspoken feelings. "Why," he asked, his strength gradually returning, "why risk everything?" Selene's silver eyes met his. "Because some protocols deserve to be broken." The distant sound of weapons fire reminded them of the danger still present. The bond had saved him, but it had also changed everything between them, and would change everything in her world when discovered. "Can it be reversed?" Ethan asked, now strong enough to sit up, though he didn't move away from her embrace. "No," she admitted. "We are connected now. Whatever comes next, we face it together." His hand found hers, fingers intertwining in a gesture that sent ripples of shared sensation through their newly formed bond. "Together," he agreed, and through their connection, she knew it was a promise he intended to keep. The stolen transport vessel hummed as it tore through hyperspace, carrying them away from Nexus 7 and the chaos they'd left behind. 3 days had passed since their escape, and with each passing hour, the bond between them grew stronger. Ethan stood at the viewport, watching the dimensional shear create ripples of light across the darkness. Behind him, he felt Selene enter the cabin before he heard her, a new awareness that still startled him. "The Araxian High Council has issued a formal summons," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil he could feel radiating through their connection. "They're demanding my immediate return to face charges of technological heresy." Ethan turned to face her. The formal diplomatic robes were gone, replaced by a simple flight suit that somehow made her seem more real, more present. The luminescent patterns on her skin pulsed with anxiety she couldn't hide from him. "And what about me?" he asked. "Am I to be presented as evidence of your crime?" A flicker of amusement crossed their bond. "You would be the first human to witness an Araxian tribunal. Some would consider that a diplomatic honor." "Some haven't felt what I've felt these past days," he replied, stepping closer. The bond between them had transformed from a desperate life-saving measure into something neither of them had anticipated. Every emotion, every sensation echoed between them. When he'd first awakened after the attack, the intensity had been overwhelming, her thoughts cascading through his mind, her sensations mingling with his own. "It's getting stronger," she observed, reaching out to touch the healed skin where the energy blast had torn through him. The contact sent shivers of shared pleasure through them both. The symbiote wasn't designed for human physiology. It's adapting. Ethan caught her hand, holding it against his chest. Through their connection, he felt her composure waver, felt the conflict between centuries of Araxian emotional control and the new raw feelings that coursed between them. "You're afraid," he said softly. "Araxians don't fear," she replied automatically, then sighed. "But yes, what I've done cannot be undone. Using the Nexus bond means exile at best, imprisonment at worst." "Then why did you do it?" He already knew the answer through their connection, but he needed to hear her say it. Selen's silver eyes met his, the last of her diplomatic reserve crumbling. Because in that moment, watching you die for me, I realized all my years of perfect protocol meant nothing if it required sacrificing someone I... She paused, the unfamiliar emotion difficult to name. Ethan stepped closer, their bodies now inches apart. Through the bond, each could feel the other's heartbeat accelerating, desire and uncertainty mingling between them. "Someone you what?" he prompted gently. Instead of answering with words, she showed him, opening her mind completely, allowing the depth of her feelings to flow unfiltered through their connection. The intensity staggered him, raw emotion from a species renowned for their emotional control. "Selene," he whispered, his voice thick with shared feeling. When their lips met, the bond exploded with sensation. What began as a gentle exploration quickly deepened as the symbiote amplified every touch, every shared breath. Physical and mental boundaries dissolved as the connection between them flared with blinding intensity. Later, lying in each other's arms, their consciousness still partially merged, Ethan traced the patterns on her skin that now faintly echoed on his own. "Whatever happens at this tribunal," he said, "I'm with you." Selene's fingers intertwined with his. "In 3 centuries of diplomatic service, I've never broken a rule." A small smile touched her lips. "I find I rather enjoy the freedom." The ship's communications system chimed, breaking the moment. On the screen, an Araxian military vessel demanded their immediate surrender. "It seems," Selene said, rising with newfound resolve, "that we face our consequences sooner than expected." The Araxian tribunal chamber rose in concentric circles of crystalline spires, designed to intimidate with its cold perfection. 5 high counselors looked down from their elevated platforms, their ancient faces impassive, their silver eyes fixed on Selene and Ethan. "Ambassador Vix," intoned the central counselor, her voice echoing through the chamber, "you stand accused of violating the Technological Heresy Act by employing a forbidden Nexus bond symbiote. Do you deny these charges?" Selene stood tall, her diplomatic robes restored, but now bearing the subtle marks of her changed status, the luminescent patterns altered by the bond she shared with Ethan. "I do not deny them," she replied, her voice clear and unrepentant. A murmur ran through the assembled Araxian observers. Behind the counselors, a massive display showed Selene's distinguished 300-year diplomatic record, now marked with a crimson indicator of disgrace. "You have served the collective with distinction for centuries," continued the counselor. "Your actions are therefore all the more incomprehensible. To bond yourself to a human, a species barely emerged from their planetary confines, for what purpose?" Through their connection, Ethan felt Selene's moment of doubt, followed by a surge of resolve that strengthened his own courage. "For a purpose your protocols have long forgotten," Selene responded. "Connection, understanding, the very foundation of true diplomacy." The eldest counselor leaned forward. "What you describe is precisely why the Nexus bond was banned. Such raw connection leads to impulsive decisions, emotional contamination. You compromised centuries of careful diplomatic positioning for a momentary attachment." "With respect," Ethan interjected, stepping forward despite the guard's warning gestures, "it wasn't momentary, and it wasn't just attachment." The counselors regarded him with collective disdain. "The human subject will remain silent." "He will not," Selene countered, her markings flaring with intensity. "You claim to be masters of diplomacy, yet you refuse to hear all voices. What you call emotional contamination, I have discovered, is clarity." Through their bond, Ethan felt her gathering courage, drawing partly from his strength as he drew from hers. He reached for her hand, their fingers intertwining in full view of the tribunal, a shocking breach of Araxian propriety that caused the audience to gasp. "For 3 centuries," Selene continued, "I have followed every protocol, maintained every boundary, honored every tradition. I negotiated 17 peace treaties and prevented 3 interstellar wars. I did everything asked of me and more." Her voice strengthened. "And in all that time, not once did I make a choice that was truly my own until I saved him." The central counselor's expression hardened. "You betrayed your people's most sacred law." "No," Selene replied. "I honored its original purpose. The Nexus bond was created to foster understanding between different minds, to build bridges where none existed. That you turned it into a forbidden symbol of our fear of true connection is the real betrayal." Through their bond, images flowed between them. The future they might build together, the changes their connection might inspire, the possibility of a new kind of diplomacy built on genuine understanding rather than careful distance. "I stand before you not as a criminal," Selene declared, "but as the first of what we might become. For centuries, we have held ourselves apart, believing it made us stronger. I have discovered it only made us more alone." The chamber fell silent as her words resonated through the crystalline architecture. Ethan squeezed her hand, sending a wave of pride and support through their connection. "The sentence for your crime is exile," pronounced the central counselor eventually. "You will be stripped of your diplomatic status and forbidden from representing the Araxian collective in any capacity." Selene stood taller. "Then I will represent something new, a bridge between our peoples built on true understanding, not careful scripts and perfect protocols." As they turned to leave the chamber, their shared bond humming with possibility rather than defeat, the youngest counselor's voice rang out. "Ambassador," she paused, correcting herself. "Selene, what does it feel like, this connection you've chosen?" Selene looked back, meeting the counselor's curious gaze. "Like coming home to a place I never knew existed." Outside, beneath the triple moons of Araxis, Ethan pulled Selene close. Through their bond, words were unnecessary, each feeling the other's mixture of uncertainty and hope. "What now?" he asked aloud, for the simple pleasure of hearing her voice. Selene's silver eyes reflected the starlight as she smiled, a full, uninhibited expression he now recognized as love. "Now," she said, "we write our own protocols." Their shared heartbeats synchronized as the symbiote pulsed between them. No longer a forbidden technology, but the physical manifestation of a choice that had changed everything. For them, and perhaps someday for their worlds.